Saint Augustine Commentary on Psalm 51. Neither must this multitude's throng be defrauded, nor their infirmity burthened. Silence we ask, and quiet, in order that our voice after yesterday's labor be able with some little vigor to last out. It must be believed that your love has met together in greater numbers today for nothing else, but that you may pray for those whom an alien and perverse inclination does keep away. For we are speaking neither of heathens nor of Jews, but of Christians, nor of those that are yet catechumens, but of many that are even baptized, from the laver, of whom you do no wise differ. And yet to their heart you are unlike. For today how many brethren of ours we think of and deplore their going unto vanities and lying insanities, to the neglect of that to which they have been called. Who, if in the very circus from any cause they chance to be startled, do immediately cross themselves and stand bearing it on the forehead in the very place from whence they had withdrawn, if they had borne it in heart. God's mercy must be implored, that he may give understanding for condemning these things, inclination to flee them, and mercy to forgive. Opportunely then of penitence a psalm today has been chanted. Speak we even with the absent. There will be to them for our voice your memory. Neglect not the wounded and feeble, but that you may more easily make whole ye ought to abide. Correct by reproving, comfort by addressing, set an example by living well. He will be with them that has been with you. For now that you have overpassed these dangers, the fountain of God's mercy is not closed. Where you have come, they will come. Where you have passed, they will pass. A grievous thing it is indeed, an exceeding perilous, nay, ruinous, and for certain a deadly thing, that witting they sin. For in one way to these vanities does he run that despises the voice of Christ, in another way he that knows from what he is fleeing. But that not even of such men we ought to despair, this psalm does show. For there is written over it the title thereof, a psalm of David himself, when there came to him Nathan the prophet, when he went in unto Beersheba. Beersheba was a woman, wife of another. With grief indeed we speak and with trembling, but yet God would not have to be hushed what he has willed to be written. I will say then, not what I will, but what I am obliged. I will say not as one exhorting to imitation, but as one instructing you to fear. Captivated with this woman's beauty, the wife of another, the king and prophet David, from whose seed according to the flesh the Lord was to come, Romans 1:3, committed adultery with her. This thing in this psalm is not read, but in the title thereof it appears. But in the book of Kings, 2 Samuel 11, verse 2 to 17, it is more fully read. Both scriptures are canonical. To both, without any doubt, by Christians credit must be given. The sin was committed and was written down. Moreover, a husband in war he caused to be killed, And after this deed, there was sent to him Nathan the prophet, to Samuel 12:1, sent by the Lord to reprove him for so great an outrage. What men should beware of, we have said, but what if they shall have fallen, they should imitate, let us hear. For many men will to fall with David, and will not to rise with David. Not then for falling is the example set forth, but if you shall have fallen for rising again, take heed lest you fall. Not the delight of the younger be the lapse of the elder, but be the fall of the elder the dread of the younger. For this it was set forth, for this was written, for this is in the church often read and chanted. Let them hear that have not fallen, lest they fall. Let them hear that have fallen, that they may rise. So great a man's sin is not hushed, is proclaimed in the church. There men hear that are ill hearers, and seek for themselves countenance for sinning. They look out for means whereby they may defend what they have made ready to commit, not how they may beware of what they have not committed. And they say to themselves, if David, why not I too? Thence that soul is more unrighteous, which forasmuch as it has done it because David did, therefore has done worse than David. I will say this very thing, if I shall be able more plainly. David had set forth to himself known for a precedent as you have. He had fallen by lapse of concupiscence, not by the countenance of holiness. Thou dost set before your eyes as it were a holy man, in order that you may sin. Thou dost not copy his holiness, but dost copy his fall. Thou dost love that in David which in himself David hated. You make you ready to sin, you incline to sin. In order that you may sin, you consult the book of God, the scriptures of God. For this you hear, that you may do what displeases God. This did not David. He was reproved by a prophet. He stumbled not over a prophet. But others, hearing to their health by the fall of a strong man, measure their weakness, and desiring to avoid what God condemns, from careless looking do restrain their eyes. Them they fix not upon the beauty of another's flesh, nor make themselves careless with perverse simpleness. They say not, with good intent I have observed, of kindness I have observed, of charity I have long looked. For they set before themselves the fall of David, and they see that this great man for this purpose has fallen, in order that little men may not be willing to look on that whereby they may fall. For they restrain their eyes from wantonness, not readily do they join themselves in company. They do not mingle with strange women, they raise not complying eyes to strange balconies, to strange terraces. For from afar David saw her with whom he was captivated. 2 Samuel 11:2. Woman afar, lust near. What he saw was elsewhere in himself that whereby he fell. This weakness of the flesh must be therefore minded. The words of the apostle recollected, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body. Romans 6:12. He has not said, let there not be, but let there not reign. There is sin in you when you take pleasure, there reigns if you shall have consented. Carnal pleasure, especially if proceeding unto unlawful and strange objects, is to be bridled, not let loose. by government to be tamed, not to be set up for government. Look and be without care, if you have nothing whereby you may be moved. But you make answer, I contain with a strong resolution. Are you any wise stronger than David? He admonishes, moreover, by such an example that no one ought to lift himself up in prosperous circumstances. For many fear adverse circumstances, fear not prosperous circumstances. Prosperity is more perilous to soul than adversity to body. First, prosperity does corrupt, in order that adversity may find something to break. My brethren, stricter watch must be kept against felicity. Therefore, see ye after what manner the saying of God amid our own felicity does take from us security. Serve ye, he says, the Lord in fear, and exalt unto him with trembling. In exaltation, in order that we may render thanks. In trembling, lest we fall. This sin did not David, when he was suffering Saul for persecutor. When holy David was suffering Saul his enemy, when he was being vexed by his persecutions, when he was fleeing through various places in order that he might not fall into his hands, he lusted not for her that was another's. He slew not husband after committing adultery with wife. He was in the infirmity of his tribulation, so much the more intimate with God, as he seemed more miserable. Something useful is tribulation, useful the surgeon's lancet, rather than the devil's temptation. He became secure when his enemies were overthrown, pressure was removed, swelling grew out. This example therefore does avail to this end, that we should fear felicity. Tribulation, he says, and grief I found, and on the name of the Lord I called. But it was done. I would say these words to those that have not done the like, in order that they should watch to keep their uncorruptness, and that while they take heed how a great one has fallen, they shall be small should fear. But if any that has already fallen hears these words, and that has in his conscience any evil thing, to the words of this psalm let him advert. Let him heed the greatness of the wound, but not despair of the majesty of the physician. Sin with despair is certain death. Let no one therefore say, if already any evil thing I have done, already I am to be condemned. God pardons not such evil things. Why add I not sins to sins? I will enjoy this word in pleasure, in wantonness, in wicked cupidity. Now hope of amendment having been lost, let me have even what I see, if I can't have what I believe. This psalm then, while it makes heedful those that have not believed, so does not will them that have fallen to be despaired of. Whoever you are that has sinned and hesitatest to exercise penitence for your sin, despairing of your salvation, hear David groaning. To you Nathan the prophet has not been sent. David himself has been sent to you. Hear him crying, and with him cry. Hear him groaning, and with him groan. Hear him weeping, and mingle tears. Hear him amended, and with him rejoice. If from you sin could not be excluded, be not hope of pardon excluded. there was sent to that man Nathan the prophet. Observe the king's humility. He rejected not the words of him giving admonition. He said not, Darest thou speak to me, a king? An exalted king heard a prophet. Let his humble people hear Christ. Hear therefore these words, and say thou with him, Have pity upon me, O God, after your great mercy. Verse 1. He that implores great mercy confesses great misery. Let them seek a little mercy of you that have sinned in ignorance. Have pity, he says, upon me after your great mercy. Relieve a deep wound after your great healing. Deep is what I have, but in the Almighty I take refuge. Of my own so deadly wound I should despair, unless I could find so great a physician. Have pity upon me, O God, after your great mercy, and after the multitude of your pities blot out my iniquity. What he says, blot out my iniquity, is this, have pity upon me, O God. And what he says, after the multitude of your pities, is this, after your great mercy. Because great is the mercy, many are the mercies, and of your great mercy many are you pitying. Thou dost regard mockers to amend them, dost regard ignorant men to teach them, dost regard men confessing to pardon. Did he this in ignorance? A certain man had done some, many evil things he had done. Mercy, he says, I obtained because ignorant I did it in unbelief. 1 Timothy 1:13. This David could not say, ignorant I did it, for he was not ignorant how very evil a thing was the touching of another's wife, and how very evil a thing was the killing of the husband, who knew not of it, and was not even angered. They obtained therefore the mercy of the Lord, that having ignorance done it. And they that have knowing done it, obtain not any mercy, it may chance but great mercy. More and more wash me from mine unrighteousness. Verse 2. What is more and more wash? One must taint, more and more wash the sins of one knowing. Thou that hast washed off the sins of one ignorant, not even thus is it to be despaired of your mercy. And from my delinquency purge thou me, according to the manner in which he is physician, offer a recompense. He is God, offer sacrifice. What will you give that you may be purged? For see upon whom you call, upon the just one you call. He hates sins, if he is just. He takes vengeance upon sins, if he is just. You will not be able to take away from the Lord God his justice. Entreat mercy, but observe the justice. There is mercy to pardon the sinner, there is justice to punish the sin. What then? Thou askest mercy, shall sin unpunished abide? Let David answer, let those that have fallen answer with David and say, No, Lord, no sin of mine shall be unpunished. I know the justice of him whose mercy I ask. It shall not be unpunished, but for this reason I will not that thou punish me, because I punish my sin. For this reason I beg that thou pardon, because I acknowledge. For mine iniquity I acknowledge, and my delinquency is before me ever. Verse 3. I have not be put behind my back what I have done. I look not at others, forgetful of myself. I pretend not to pull out a straw from my brother's eye, when there is a beam in my eye. Matthew 7:5. My sin is before me, not behind me. For it was behind me when to me was sent the prophet, and set before me the parable of the poor man's sheep. For says Nathan the prophet to David, there was a certain rich man having very many sheep. But a poor man his neighbor had one little ewe sheep, which in his bosom and of his own food he was feeding. There came a stranger to the rich man, nothing from his flock he took, for the lithe ewe sheep of the poor man his neighbor he lusted. Here he slew for the stranger. What does he deserve? But the other being angry does pronounce sentence, when the king, evidently knowing not wherein he had been taken, declared the rich man deserving of death, and that the sheep be restored fourfold, most sternly and most justly. But his sin was not yet before him, behind his back what he had done. His own iniquity he did not yet acknowledge, and therefore another's he did not pardon. But the prophet, being for this purpose sent, took from his back the sin, and before his eyes placed it, so that he might see that sentence too stern to have been pronounced against himself. For cutting and healing his heart's wound, he made a lancet of his tongue. Against you alone have I sinned, and before you an evil thing have I done. Verse 4. What is this? For before man was not another's wife debauched and husband slain? Did not all men know what David had done? To Samuel 11:4-15. What is, against you alone have I sinned, and before you an evil thing have I done? Because thou alone art without sin. He is a just punisher that has nothing in him to be punished. He is a just reprover that has nothing in him to be reproved. That you may be justified in your sayings and conquer when you are judged. To whom he speaks, brethren, to whom he speaks is difficult to understand. To God surely he speaks, and it is evident that God the Father is not judged. What is and conquer when you are judged? He sees the future judge to be judged, one just by sinners to be judged, and therein conquering, because in him was nothing to be judged. For alone among men could truly say the God-man, if you have found in me sin, say, John 8:46. But perchance there was what escaped men, and they found not what was really there, but was not manifest. In another place, John 14:30, he says, Behold, there comes the Prince of the world, being an acute observer of all sins. Behold, he says, there comes the Prince of this world, with death afflicting sinners, presiding over death. For by the malice of the devil death came into the world. Wisdom 2:24. Behold, he says, there comes the Prince of the world. He said these words close upon his passion. And in me he shall find nothing, nothing of sin, nothing worthy of death, nothing worthy of condemnation. And as if it were said to him, Why then dost thou die? He continues and says, that all men may know that I do the will of my Father. Arise, let us go hence. I suffer, he says, undeserving for men deserving, in order that them I may make deserving of my life, for whom I undeservedly suffer their death. To him then, having no sin, says on the present occasion the prophet David, Against you only have I sinned, and before you an evil thing have I done, that you may be justified in your sayings and conquer when you are judged. For thou overcomest all men, all judges, and he that deems himself just before you is unjust. Thou alone justly judgest, having been unjustly judged. That hast power to lay down your life, and hast power again to take it. John 10:18. Thou conquerest then when you are judged. All men thou overcomest, because you are more than men, and by you were men made.